forgive us. The church is so boring very often, isn't it? But nobody ever said that about Jesus Christ. He is the most exciting person who's ever lived. And he was the most spellbinding storyteller. And you can forget people like Jackie Collins and J.K. Rowling and so on. They're not a patch on Jesus. People flocked to hear him, and he very often utterly amazed them. We're going to have a chance now to see on the screen one of the most amazing stories he told. I don't know if you can read that from where you are. If not, or if you prefer, just grab one of these yellow books on the table, because you've got the text in front of you there. It'd be nice if you do this, because you take this away with you if you'd like afterwards. It's one of the contemporaries of Jesus telling the story of this amazing person. And if you turn to page 102 on this, what I'm going to suggest is, so that we can get the vibes of this story, is that we all read it together from the little number on the left-hand side that says number 19, no, 15, and then down to the little number, which they call them verses, number 23. So shall we have a go at either reading it off the screen or reading it off this? If you don't want to, don't. But let's have some sound coming up, okay? When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to them, "Blessed is the man who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." And Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet, and he invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I have just bought a field, and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' So another one said, 'I've just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry, and he ordered his servant, 'Go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you ordered has been done, but there is still room.' Then the master told his servant, 'Go out to the roads and country lanes and make them come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those men who were invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" That's the story. Thank you for reading it so well. And I'm going to pick out 5 amazing things from this story. Here's the first one. There's an amazing invitation. When I say God, I wonder what image comes to your mind. A heavenly policeman to make sure you aren't enjoying yourself? A sort of cold judge who says, "Go"? No. The picture we get of God in the Bible is a God who wants our company. He loves us. And he says, "Come, for all is now ready. Come to my dinner party." I find it utterly amazing that the God I have neglected and kicked against, the God I have sworn didn't exist, makes me an invitation like that. In that word "come," I see to the heart of God. Many an employer says, "Go, you're redundant." Many a spouse says, "Go, get a divorce." Many a parent says, "Go, get a job." But throughout the Bible, you find this wonderful word, "come," emerging from God. I find it utterly astonishing and very encouraging, because we feel in our bones uneasy talking about God. We feel that really this God must be pretty hostile to us. And he's not hostile to us. He says, come to my party. You see, it's so different from all other faiths. In other faiths, you get men and women seeking after God. In the Christian faith, you get God seeking after men and women. He wants our company. We do our best to avoid him, but he runs after us and says, come, for everything is now ready. That's the first amazing thing I see from this story. Here's the second one. There's an amazing description. But of course, this story is not just about a dinner party. It's a picture of God and his invitation to human beings and their reaction to it. I'm sure you've seen that. But here's the second amazing thing. Not only an amazing invitation, but an amazing description. I wonder how you would describe Christianity, how it has struck you, what your experience of it has been. Is it about decency? Is it about church? Is it about believing things? Is it about ritual? Is it about duty? And this story says, no, it's a party. It's a dinner party. It's a delight, like a good dinner, like a hog roast. And that's, of course, why I'm talking about this story tonight, because it's the occasion when we're having a great dinner. Great food, great company, great enjoyment. And how we need it, because there is a terrible emptiness in society. The unemployment and the fear and the pain that demands drugs to quell it, and the hatred that prompts people into violence. And that really leads many people to despair and to feeling quite empty. Came across this quotation from the rock star Bob Geldof, marvelous chap. I met him once, great humanitarian, very generous. But when he was asked if he had a real sense of satisfaction in his life, he had to say, no, I don't, not at all. I'm unfulfilled as a human being. Otherwise, why are there these large holes in here? And he thumped his chest. I know what is down there in those holes, and I'm frightened of it, and it makes me depressed. Or we tend to think that the people who've got it made, the people who are rich and rolling in lolly, then they're all right, and they get deep fulfillment that way, but it's not really like that. I read this account about Mick Jagger, who's been one of the richest people in the world. With fame and success and influence, he has 4 houses, over £2 million each, 5 kids by 3 women. And his friend Keith Richards said, 99% of the male population of the world would give a limb to be Mick Jagger, but he's not happy. He's deeply dissatisfied. And so are a great many of our society, if we're honest, deeply dissatisfied. And the Lord comes to us, as it were, with a smile on his face, and he says, you idiot, I designed you with a God-shaped hole inside you, and you fill it with all manner of junk, and then wonder why you're not satisfied. Come back to me, and you'll find that it satisfies like a good party. Well, I'm not asking you to believe me. I've got a couple of folks that I've come to get to know in the last 3 days here. And the first one is going to be Toby Hunter, and the second one is going to be Liesl Bosch. So could you come along and just tell us a word? I want to ask you, Toby, if you have found, as I know you're a Christian, have you found satisfaction by and large, or not particularly?
Yeah, well, for me personally, I grew up in a Christian household, so I grew up with church, for the whole of my life, really. But I realised kind of into my teens that really I wasn't actually really liking it. It wasn't fulfilling me And even though I was aware that God loved me and that he died for me and that he rose again, I hadn't made that step that I really wanted to follow him. But one of the youth leaders at my church invited us as a group to go along to a different church, which was a lot more, which really affected me, because the people in that place were just so filled with a real deep joy and a real happiness, and there was clearly something much more deeper in their faith than I'd realised at my church. But unfortunately, I wasn't quite able to explore that at that time. But then when I came to the uni, I was freed of all that kind of, I must go to my parents' church because that's the only church I've ever known. So I really wanted to find my own church. And eventually, I felt particularly drawn to a church called St. Matt's, which is actually just behind Morrison's, if you happen to go there. And at this church, there were a lot of these same kind of types of people. And I really felt this was a good opportunity to see, if there is more to this Christian life, then this would be a great time to explore it. So on that particular night, I decided to actually say to Jesus, that I know that this whole life I haven't really kind of followed you, because I've been quite content with my life in general, but if you are going to do something, then please kind of do it now. And that was the moment really when, for me, everything changed really. There was a real sense throughout that that there was just a real inner joy within me after that moment. I went through a phase where God just revealed to me just how deep his love is for me. I'd heard about this kind of in church, being around it, but getting that truth from your head to your heart was something that God really wanted to do in my life. And I had a real sense of acceptance and belonging to him. And for me personally, I was a really kind of socially awkward guy. I was, if my parents had people around that I knew, I'd hide away upstairs in my room and then make a nice half an hour appearance of politeness. But there was a real kind of fear within me of, people not knowing what people would think of me. I felt like I had to kind of go down a route of, I should be this person, but it wasn't really me inside. But when God really broke into my life, I realized that actually my identity comes from him, and he is the person that is in charge of my life, and he's made me specifically for a purpose and for a plan. And when I understood that, and I understood just how much he loved me, I began to realize that it actually doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. People might put you down, but really, if God loves you and he cares for you and he's called you to a purpose and you're following that purpose, then that's actually all that matters. And I was really freed from that fear from that moment. And as a result, I've seen amazing things that God's done. I think he's really called me out of that place of shyness, and actually now I'm actually really open to sharing what I believe with people, just because I've experienced that love for myself. And when you do that, the love just overflows out of you, and you can't contain it. So he's really actually taken something that would have been a weakness in me and made it into a real strength. And I think that really does show just how transforming a life with God is.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for that and for your sort of naturalness and warmth about it. Great. Let's turn to Liesl now and see what your evaluation of this Christian life is.
Hello. Okay, I don't know if this is, it's working. Hi, so I'm Liesl. I'm a fourth year student studying management and French. Just to give a bit of background. I was born in South Africa, and I lived there until I was about 7 and a half. And then my family decided to move to the UK, and I've lived here since. And I was born in a Christian family, so I guess you'd say that the concept of God has never been that strange to me, because I've always kind of grown up with that. But I would say that I had a very wrong idea of what God is like. I was quite scared of God, I'd say. I saw him as someone who was always kind of watching me, waiting for me to fail and mess up, and waiting for me to come crawling back to him and ask for forgiveness. And I just saw him as being quite distant from me. And that's pretty much how I saw God up until I was about 18, just before I came to uni. And I went to help at this summer children's camp thing with my friend in Essex. And this one evening, the guy was speaking at church. He was talking about this verse in Matthew in the Bible, which I've written down, so I'm going to read it. So this is a verse that says, so it's just, Jesus was just talking in one of his most famous sermons, and he says, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. And it was like something just hit me over the head, where I was like, I've had this so wrong the whole time. Like God isn't interested in what I can do for him. It's not about all the work that I'm doing for him. It's all he wants is to know me and to have a relationship with me. And actually, he's not this distant God that's kind of telling me off the whole time. He's someone who wants to be going through things with me, and he wants to see me succeed and wants to be there for me when I don't succeed. So yeah, that definitely had a big impact on me. And then I guess the next part would be skipping forward a bit. At the very end of my first year at uni, my dad passed away really suddenly. It was he was on a trip with my brother. It was honestly the hardest thing that I have ever gone through, and my family, it was just horrible. And I suppose, my life just completely, it felt like it was changed overnight kind of thing. And I suppose that most people would say at this point, which I think is quite a rational question, how can a loving God let this happen to me? And let this happen to my family? And it's definitely the question that I would have been asking myself, and I would have been asking other Christians, had I not had this previous revelation of who Jesus is. Because then I suddenly realized that actually, Jesus, God isn't this distant God that's inflicting suffering on me. He's not someone that sent this to happen to me. But Jesus himself is living with me, and he's dealing with that with me. He's going through that suffering with me. And actually, in the few days that followed, there were 3 people that didn't know each other at all. They each sent me this verse from the Bible in 3 different languages, which could be a coincidence, I guess, but I really thought that it was God that was speaking. So I'll read that one as well. It's from the book of Romans, and it said, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. And so, I think if we're talking about joy, and if I had to give a definition of what joy is, it's not what you might think of as being really happy all the time. Being a Christian doesn't mean that you're suddenly, you don't have any struggles, and you don't have pain or anything like that, and it doesn't mean that you're constantly radiant and happy. But I think it means that you have a deeper security, and you know that actually ultimately Jesus has dealt with those things, and he's made a way for there to not be any any more suffering. And and the picture that you gave of the sea, sorry, it's like it might look really rough on the top, and so we still have struggles, but deep down it's calm, and you know that you're okay.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't think I want. I've got one. Thanks a lot. That's really great. Two different cameos from two different people on this idea of the party. The Lord who can actually transform our weaknesses and change us out of one of them, and the Lord who is the underlying security of our life, even in the really hard times, from Liesl. So thank you both very much. Those are good insights into what the party with Christ means. I see a third thing here that's amazing, and that is an amazing offer. Come, for everything is now ready, says the host. Now, the Jews thought that if they lived a decent life, and if they went to the synagogue, everything might be okay with them at the end of the age when they had to face God, that their good deeds would be put in one side of the scale, their bad deeds in the other side of the scale, and with a bit of luck, the good deeds and the synagogue going and so on would all prevail. But Jesus says, hey, we're not talking about when you die. We're not talking about the end of the age. Everything is now ready. So what is ready? What's on offer? Well, God invites us to his party, but it's not a bring and share any more than tonight is. He provides it all. Forgiveness now, not at the end of the world. Joy and peace now. Stability in tough times now. His companionship now. Moral strength when you get out of here into all the pressures of society. You're going to need that. And that's what he offers to give now. I don't think you'll find those things, at least so strongly, elsewhere. Come to the party, says the host. The entrance is free. It's on the house. Don't miss it. Now, we find that so hard to take because we want to earn our position at God's party. But think how insulted any dinner host would be if you said to them, here's a bit of garlic bread to add to the meal. They would say, hey, come on, I invited you to a meal. I don't want your beastly bit of garlic bread. And yet that's how we approach God, isn't it? Here I am, we say, you should be very chuffed to see me. After all, I had my dratted aunt to lunch the other day. How many brownie points is that worth? You ought to be very pleased with me. A lot of people take that sort of attitude. And Jesus shows how sick that attitude is. God will not welcome us if our attitude is, move over, God, here I come. If heaven was made up of self-made men like that, it will be hell, wouldn't it? No, we come to the party, his party, not because we deserve it, but because he is the most generous host imaginable. Jesus put this very vividly in a similar story that he told. In this case, it wasn't just a dinner, it was a wedding feast. And Jesus tells us that the host at this wedding feast was so generous and so keen that nobody should be ashamed or embarrassed by their inadequate clothes, that he provides not only the feast, but he has chaps standing at the door with wedding garments, great white garments to cover up all their clothes. And so you can't tell, if the jeans have got all ripped knees and stuff like that, or if the shirt hasn't been changed for months. You can't tell all that. It's all covered with this white robe. And one man comes and they say, here you are, sir, your wedding garment. Keep your beastly wedding garment, he says. I don't want it. My own DJ is perfectly good enough, thank you very much. And he sits down. And in comes the wedding party, and at the center of it comes the master of the feast. And he looks around and he sees this guy who sticks out like a sore thumb. So he says to him, "How did you come in here without having a wedding garment?" The chap was speechless. And so the master of the feast said to the bruisers, "Come in, pick this chap, throw him out. Doesn't belong." And you think, well, that's a pretty rough thing to say for somebody who was wrongly dressed at a wedding party. No, there is a truth in this. You see, we love to come to God in our own clothes and think that they're good enough. And he says they're not. On the cross, he wore the filthy rags of our guilt in order to provide the wedding garment of his righteousness, his perfection before God. And he wants to give that to you and me. I think that is the most astounding offer I've ever come across. Jesus bore our guilt to offer me his wedding garment. It's the only way to be welcomed at the feast without being smug on the one hand or embarrassed on the other. It's a gift, and we take it and say thank you. So you would imagine that everything was hunky-dory, but it wasn't, because here's the next surprise in this story. There is an amazing series of reasons why people decline to come. They look so good. The first one says, "Well, look, I've just got some additions to my farm, and I want to feast my eyes on these new acres that are now mine." And the second one says, "Well, I bought a BMW, 10 yokes of oxen, and I just want to try them out." Very natural. And I thought the third one was the only one who had a reason. "I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come." They look great, but they're not. They're shallow as can be. Who is going to get hold of extra land without going to see it? Who is going to work oxen without trying them out beforehand to see if they've got weak legs or something like that? And as for the guy who got married, why not bring his missus? Bring her along too. These were not reasons. These were excuses, and very shallow excuses too. Incidentally, they're the same things that people bring up today. Pleasure, work, and relationships. These things all keep me away from the party. But they're excuses, and they're not reasons. Well, you may say to me, okay, those three look a bit dated, but let me try on you some of my reasons for not getting involved in real Christianity. You see, Michael, I'm not sure about God. Lots of people are like that, not surprising. Can't see him. Some people came to Isaiah one day, the ancient prophet, and they said, "Isaiah, God has gone away. It all seems so unreal." And this is what Isaiah said. He said, "The Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save. His ear hasn't gone heavy that it cannot hear. But your wrongdoings have made a barrier between you and God. And your sins have hid his face from you so that he will not hear." That's why God seems so unreal. We got a South African here, and the first time I went to Cape Town, and I'd heard all about Table Mountain, and I was looking forward to seeing Table Mountain. There was nothing but fog over Table Mountain. And I said to myself, hey, this is a myth. There never is this sort of Table Mountain. I don't believe it. And then in a day or so, a shaft of sunlight came onto through the fog, through the mist, onto the top of Table Mountain, and I could see it. And that is what God wants to do with us, to take away the cloud of unknowing and shine into our very hearts with his love and his forgiveness. Well, you say that sounds a bit churchy, but I'm not the religious sort, nor am I, ladies and gentlemen. The religious sort bumped Jesus off because he didn't conform to their narrow views. It's not being religious, this Christianity. It's being in a relationship. And there's a world of difference between the two. Religion is doing things. Relationship is just enjoying the company of somebody who loves you. Well, you say, I don't know, my life is a good one. I'm not sure that I need anything like that. What are the two first commandments in the Bible? The first one is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. If he made you, that's fair enough. Have you done it? No, none of us have. The second one is to love your neighbour as yourself. That's the way for a coherent society. Have you done it? No, neither have I. None of us have. In other words, if I say to God, I'm a pretty decent chap, you ought to be very chuffed with me, he says, Michael, you fail on the two very first commandments that I have for relationship with God and relationship with human beings. And the good book says, nobody is righteous, no, not one. Nobody understands, nobody really seeks after God. All have turned aside. My life is a good one. Don't kid yourself. It's not good enough for God. And that's why he's provided that wedding garment for you. Well, you say, actually, since we're talking about these things, and I'm a bit embarrassed about it, but there are certain things, there's something in my life which I am doing, which I cannot give up. And I want to say to you, if you feel like that, and many of us do, you don't have to give something up before you come to the party. But when you put your life in the hands of Jesus Christ, he loves you, he embraces you. And if there's bad stuff there, gently he will wean you from it. But it isn't the sort of entry price that you have to pay to get in. Well, you say, I think I might commit myself if only I could be sure first. Sorry, life's not like that. Think of swimming. You say, I think I would jump into this water if I could be sure it would hold me up. No, you have to go into the water first, and then you discover that it does hold you up. Or, I think I would marry this man or this girl if I could be sure that it would be a happy marriage. You can't be sure until you commit yourself. And the assurance comes as you go on together. It comes after you have entered the party, not before. Well, you say, actually, it would cost too much to be a Christian. Well, now you're talking. It is costly to be a Christian. I mentioned earlier on that the entry fee to the Christian life is nothing at all. But I mention now that the annual subscription is everything you've got. It is costly to follow Jesus Christ. In fact, in this very same chapter, at the end of the chapter, Jesus is saying, can you keep it up? Can you face a fight? Can you bear to be in a minority? Because if you follow me, all of those things are going to happen. But look, Jesus wants the very best for us. And he doesn't want to take anything away from us that is good. It is costly to follow him. But I wouldn't swap being a follower of Jesus Christ for anything. I found that what I thought was going to be costly when I entrusted my life to him, it's peanuts now. It's nothing compared with the joy of following him. So I would submit to you this evening that really excuses like this are pretty unworthy. They won't shelter us when we come face to face with the living God. They just show actually what rebels we are against his love. Pudding is soon going to be with us, so I'm going to bring you the fifth of these remarkable things in this little story. There is an amazing note of urgency. Come now. And you notice the host sending out servants to pull people in from the rest homes and from the streets and the beggars and something like that. An amazing note of urgency, because it is time. It's time to decide. The host will not send samples of food to those who stay away, any more than the hosts here will send samples of food to those who stay away. No, you're invited to the party and you come and you get the food. But if you say no to the party, don't expect God to send you isolated gifts like peace when exam pressure is on, or guidance about career, or joy when you're feeling down in the dumps. You don't come to the banquet except to be with a host and with other guests. And when you do, you'll find yourself increasingly full of joy spreading through your life. But if you say no to him, well, it says none of those people who were invited and said no will taste of my dinner. That sounds pretty tough, doesn't it? You'll face a closed door. It's not that God locks the door against us. We kick it shut from our side. We decide to keep the Lord, who loves us, out of our life. And really, he will have to underline our choice, unless he's going to turn us into a robot and force us to come into his home. There wouldn't be much joy about that. All throughout our lives, he's got his arms stretched out to us in love, and we say, no, 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 and he still has his arms stretched out. But if finally we turn our back on him, he has to say, well, there's only two sorts of people in the world. Those who say, Lord, your will be done, and those to whom God says, your will be done. Not to decide is to decide. We can't avoid choosing. So I would, at the end of these 3 days at this lovely feast, I would love to re-echo what the host himself says, come, for everything is now ready. Oh, you say, I'm afraid of what my mates would say. Yeah, they might mock you to begin with, but soon that would turn to respect. Oh, you say, well, I've got too many questions. Of course, life is full of questions. But come to Christ with your questions. His shoulders are quite broad enough to carry them. And gradually, not all of them, but many of the questions will get resolved in the months and years that follow. Well, you say, I don't think I could ever keep it up if I was to take this step of commitment to Christ. No, you're quite right, you wouldn't. But he could keep you up. That's what he's in business for. Oh, you say, some other day. Some other day. How ungrateful that is. If somebody has given an enormous sacrifice for you, and you say, well, some other day I might come and say thank you. That's pretty unworthy, isn't it? It's also unwise, because none of us knows how long we're going to live. I've often been in a student scene or in a school scene, and suddenly somebody has dropped dead, and it completely shatters the whole community. That could happen to anyone. We don't know how long we have to live. But we do know that his arms are stretched out to us in welcome, and he says, come, for all is now ready. He offers us himself, no less. That's the Christian life. It's a life with him. He offers us that, and he looks for us to say yes to him in return. And my final thing before the pudding comes is just this. How could I say yes? I touched on it at lunchtime, but I'd just like to look at it a bit more now. It's a marvelous verse. It changes the imagery from me coming to him, changing it to him coming to me. Doesn't matter which image you have, both of us mean that we get together. So let's have a look at this wonderful verse from the Bible. Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. That verse brought me to Christian commitment. That's why I love it so much. Jesus speaking, and the image is of a house, that your life and mine is like a house. And there he is standing outside. He has suffered for us. Look at that red robe and that crown of thorns. We've never opened the door. Look at all those brambles and weeds and things shutting it out. He has the light of the world in his hand, and he wants to come in and let that light shine out of the windows. But we've kept him out. And he's such a gentleman that although he made the house of our life, although when we pinched it off him, he bought it back at tremendous cost of the cross. Although that's the case, he stands knocking, humbly knocking, and saying in effect, would you like to invite me in? And honestly, that's where the Christian life begins. I remember the day with great joy when I invited Jesus Christ into my life. And it was the beginning. It wasn't the end, of course. There's a long way to go after that. But it was the start. It was the indispensable beginning. And it wasn't a matter of feelings. Feelings come and go. It was a decision of the will to open the door. And if we do that, we're going to need help along the road. And actually the CU here has provided 4 evenings in the next 4 weeks to help people get stabilized and get going. And the wonderful thing about it is that it's unrepeatable. It never needs to be repeated to invite Jesus Christ into the life. Of course, sometimes we're going to spill wine on the tablecloth and we're going to poke the eye of the person who's eating alongside us. And that's not good. So we need to come back to the host and to say sorry, but we're not going to be thrown out of the feast. It is the best way to live. And I commend it to you with all my heart. He's only a prayer away, a prayer that says, please come in to my life and start the revolution inside me.